Hi everyone, Janie here. Welcome back to my garden. So I garden in Northern California, Zone 9B. We are hot and we are dry, and that is basically the opposite climate of what you want when you grow hydrangeas. Yet I still grow them in my garden. When I got married, I knew, really, since I was a kid, I knew I wanted to have hydrangeas as my wedding flower. I love hydrangeas. They're like big puffy white clouds, and I had them, I had white and lime green ones as my bouquet, and then as the flowers, on each table in my wedding. So because they were my wedding flower, and obviously because they're one of my favorite flowers, I had to have them in my garden as well. So one of the most common questions that I get from you all in my comment section down below, from my Instagram, and from my email is I get a lot of you that also live in hot environments like I do, asking me how I actually grow hydrangeas in my garden. So today I wanted to go over a couple tips and tricks that I've learned from trial and error, and then some of the things I've also learned about hydrangeas through my Master Gardener's training, and also just obsessively researching how to grow hydrangeas in hot climates. I wanted to share all of that with you. So let's get started. So first, let's go over the types of hydrangeas. There are actually 5 main types of hydrangeas that we need to know about because there are pretty significant differences between the types of hydrangeas. So the 5 types of hydrangeas are big leaf hydrangeas, panicle hydrangeas, smooth hydrangeas, oak leaf hydrangeas, and finally climbing hydrangeas. So it's pretty important to know the difference of what type of hydrangea either that you have or that you're looking to purchase and grow in your own garden. The differences of these different types of hydrangeas can vary from looking different, like an oak leaf hydrangea looks very different compared to a smooth hydrangea. They can handle different temperatures. Some can handle heat so much better. Some can handle cold so much better. And something to know is that different hydrangeas need to be pruned differently. All right, so let's get started talking about big leaf hydrangeas, otherwise known as Hydrangea macrophylla. These hydrangeas are the ones such as mophead, lacecap, and mountain hydrangeas. Now, I'm going to be talking about the sunset growing zone for each of these varieties of hydrangeas. If you have watched me for a while, you know how important I feel the sunset growing zones are. Unfortunately, the sunset growing zones are mostly on the west coast of the United States. So if you live on the East Coast, you can find this information, but it's pretty hard to find. But I just kind of want you guys to think about what I'm saying and take everything with a grain of salt. So I am sunset growing zone 14, but I am USDA zone 9B. So if you look at a hydrangea, it might say hardy zones 3 through 8. And what that means is it's hardy zones USDA 3 through 8. However, the USDA zones only talk about the minimum temperatures in an area. They don't take other things into account like the sunset zones do. The sunset zones takes heat, humidity, wind, etc., etc. So it's much more specific. So what I did is I actually looked up all these different types of varieties in my sunset garden book and checked out the sunset zones. And what do you know? Every single type of hydrangea is hardy in my sunset growing zone 14. So the big leaf hydrangea or Hydrangea macrophylla, the sunset growing zone is actually sunset zones 3B through 9 and then 14 through 24. So my sunset growing zone 14 is right there. Next we have panicle hydrangeas. Panicle hydrangeas or Hydrangea paniculata. This is my favorite variety, and this is one of the varieties that are known to be best for warm climates. I have to tell you guys, the majority of the hydrangeas that I have in my garden are actually panicle hydrangeas. I truly think that they are the best for warm, dry environments. Well, oak leaf hydrangeas are pretty good as well, but I'll get to that. So panicle hydrangeas are known for having the cone-shaped bloom heads as opposed to the round mop head ones, you know, the ones that look like snowballs. So they look a little bit different, but they're still such beautiful hydrangeas. One of the most popular panicle hydrangea is the limelight hydrangea. I have to say, it is my favorite to grow in the garden. Next, we have smooth hydrangeas or Hydrangea arborescens. The Annabelle hydrangea is probably the most known variety of the smooth hydrangea. Annabelles are absolutely gorgeous, but they do tend to flop over. So there's actually a newer variety of smooth hydrangeas called the Incredible, which is very, very similar to the Annabelle, but it doesn't fall over as much. Now, the next type of hydrangea is the oak leaf hydrangea or Hydrangea quercifolia. So that's called an oak leaf hydrangea because, of course, the leaves actually look like the leaves of an oak. These hydrangeas are often called hydrangeas for all seasons because not only do they have the beautiful blooms in spring and summer, but the foliage actually turns colors in the fall. So absolutely beautiful, gorgeous in woodland gardens. Oak leaf hydrangeas actually require sunny, relatively hot summers to bloom well, and they're actually the one type of hydrangea that really doesn't like consistently moist conditions. So if you live in a drier area, this hydrangea might be perfect for you. Finally, the last hydrangea to talk about is the climbing hydrangea or vining hydrangea. These are vining plants that can get up to 80 feet tall. Now, out of the 5 hydrangeas I just talked about, I would have to say that the 2 best varieties, best suited for warm environments like California, Texas, the South, are panicle hydrangeas and oak leaf hydrangeas. I love them both, but I am obviously partial to panicle hydrangeas. I truly think panicle hydrangeas are the secret to growing hydrangeas in warm climates. There are some tips and tricks to make it successful, but I think that is the way to go. Now, I do have to say, checking your zone, checking your sunset zone, checking your heat zone, most likely we can grow all types of hydrangeas. It just depends on how much work we want to put into it. I love Annabelle hydrangeas. I think that they are so gorgeous, but I don't want to bother with dealing with Annabelle hydrangeas and protecting them from the sun and making sure they get enough water and all that kind of stuff. So I lean heavily on panicle hydrangeas, such as limelight hydrangeas, because they do take a little bit of work, but nowhere near as much work as an Annabelle hydrangea might take. Now, wherever you live, it might be different. You just have to find what hydrangea is going to be the easiest for you, or what type of hydrangea you're willing to work for so that it can grow in your environment. All right, so let's get into a couple tips that I have for you all for growing hydrangeas in hotter climates. The first tip I have, I've already kind of gone over this a little bit, but that is choosing the right variety. So obviously panicle hydrangeas and oak leaf hydrangeas are kind of the go-tos for if you live in a warm climate. I truly think panicle hydrangeas are kind of the way to go. They're obviously my favorite, but if you live in a hot area that has a ton of shade, you might want to think about oak leaf hydrangeas a little bit more. Both panicle and oak leaf hydrangeas can handle hotter climates and less moisture. So if you're dealing with a drought area, kind of like I am, those 2 varieties are going to be the best for you. Tip number 2 is finding the right spot in your garden. Remember, all gardens have microclimates. This east-facing cottage garden bed is going to act very differently compared to just over the fence that is west-facing and gets about 6 hours of hot, blazing afternoon sun. I have some bobo hydrangeas on the other side of this fence, and those poor things get scorched and they're not very happy, and that's because I torture them by putting them in afternoon sun. If you have your heart set on a particular hydrangea, there's one particular variety that you want to grow, just think about where in your garden you could put that hydrangea. I am sitting here in my cottage garden bed, which is an east-facing garden bed. It gets about 6 hours of morning sun. That is gentle, easy, kind sun to this beautiful limelight hydrangea I have right behind me. This limelight hydrangea is probably the happiest hydrangea I have in my garden because it gets enough sun to bloom really well, but it's that gentle sun. So this microclimate that I have over here in my cottage garden bed is absolutely perfect for this hydrangea. A good rule of thumb just to follow if you live in a warmer climate is just to keep your hydrangeas out of the hot afternoon sun. My next tip for growing hydrangeas in hot climates is adjusting what you actually can control. Now, I know we cannot control everything in our garden. We can't control how much rain we get. We can't control how much sun we get. But there are things that we can control to help our hydrangeas thrive. So first thing I control is the amount of supplemental water I give to my hydrangeas. If you're growing big leaf, panicle, smooth hydrangeas, really all types, you want to make sure that they're getting enough water. I actually have two 2-gallon per hour emitters on each of my hydrangeas in the garden. During the summer, my irrigation system runs pretty much every day. And then on the very hot parts of the summer, when we have those heat waves, you will even see me out a second time during the day, supplementally watering my hydrangeas. Make sure that you are watering your hydrangeas early in the morning versus in the hot afternoon or even closer to the evening. This will give the hydrangeas time to soak in the water before the hot sun causes all the water to evaporate. It will also prevent the wilting of the leaves during the day because they'll be well hydrated in the morning and they'll start the day off right. Remember that hydrangeas have shallow roots. So as the day gets hotter, the top part of the soil is going to dry out because of the hot sun. The way that we can deal with this problem is mulching our hydrangeas. Mulch, mulch, mulch. When you put a layer of mulch a couple inches down, that's actually going to slow down the evaporation rate of the water, and it's actually going to keep the water in the root zone of those hydrangeas and hopefully prevent them from wilting during the hot days. One other thing that I don't tend to do, but it is a possibility, on really, really, really hot days, you can even think about putting up a shade cloth on the west side of your hydrangeas just to protect your hydrangeas from the hot afternoon sun. Finally, remember not to prune during the summers. If your hydrangea leaves do scorch, and mine definitely do scorch, especially when we have crazy heat waves, don't prune those leaves off. That is actually going to stress the plant out. And think about, you're taking that shade umbrella of those scorched leaves away, so more parts of the plant get damaged. So if you see scorched leaves, hold back. I know it doesn't look good, but don't prune those off during the summer. Wait until the temperatures start to cool down a little bit. Next tip I have is annoying, I know, but it's to be patient. Be patient when you plant your hydrangea. You have to remember that it takes time for a plant to get rooted in. And I feel like this is very important for hydrangeas in particular because hydrangeas, they need moisture for their leaves. The way that plants get moisture up into their foliage is through the root system. So if you plant a new shrub, a new hydrangea shrub, and it doesn't have a very well developed root system, those roots are not going to be able to get the water up to the foliage, and the foliage might wilt sooner than you think it should or might scorch sooner than you think it should. If you're patient and you let that hydrangea root in and really expand its root system, every year it's going to be able to take up more of the water that you give it, and it's going to wilt less and scorch less and perform better for you. So be patient. I always like to think I want to give my hydrangeas about 3 years before I take a good look and really decide if it's working well in that spot. That's a long time, I know, but that's how much time I want to give it to make sure it's rooted in. Next tip I have is more of a maintenance tip, but I do think it's important because I do think a lot of people make this mistake and think that the hydrangea just can't grow in their garden when really they just prune their hydrangea at the wrong time. There are hydrangeas that bloom on old wood and hydrangeas that bloom on new wood. And you have to know what type you have so that you know when the right time is to prune your hydrangea. If you prune at the wrong time, you can actually be pruning off the buds and taking away the chance for that hydrangea to bloom the next season. So when you purchase a hydrangea, make sure you know when the correct time is to prune so you know that you're pruning properly and you're not messing the blooms up for the next season. Okay, finally, I have to say, and I cannot emphasize this enough, play around with it. I feel like the only way that I've become a good gardener, a gardener who can actually grow things in her garden, is that I am not afraid to fail. I'm not afraid to make a mistake. So I will throw a hydrangea somewhere and I will watch it and I will wait and I will see how it does and I will troubleshoot. And if the plant completely fails and completely scorches and completely dies, then I know that wasn't the right spot for it. But maybe I can put a limelight hydrangea in my cottage garden bed and it can bloom beautifully and it can be the happiest plant there is. And it was just by chance that I put that limelight in that spot. So best advice I have for all of you is whatever microclimates you have, whatever zone you have, play around with it. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to kill your hydrangea, because you never know. It might work beautifully and you might have a garden full of gorgeous hydrangeas. So to sum this whole video up, how to grow hydrangeas in hot climates, it's a lot of work, it's a little bit of luck, but just remember it is possible and you just need to try. So I hope you all enjoyed this and I hope you all have a chance to get in your garden today.